Hi everyone, and welcome to F-Bomb Friday. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my husband, Todd. Hey, hun.
Hey, baby.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Let's hit it. They say the forest keeps what we throw away. It hides rusted tools, old campfires, and sometimes it hides stories so big they bend the truth. Stories passed like coins from lip to ear. A farmer unearths mammoth bones and calls them a giant's thigh. A newspaper runs a headline that makes the town hold its breath. A myth gets stitched into memory and refashioned until the impossible feels believable. On today's episode of F-Bomb Friday, we walk that thin, trembling line between myth and evidence. From the thunderous giants of old world myth, the Nephilim, Titans, Jotun, the tall tales of North American lumber camps, and finally to the small towns in the sandpits of Michigan, where once upon a headline, people claimed to have found bones of humans more than 8 feet tall. Were they giants? Or were they a mirror of what people wanted to believe? Or talking about the giants of Michigan. Long before we had satellites or census forms, humans built meaning by making the world larger or smaller. Giants became a universal language. If regular men could not follow forest, perhaps a giant could. If a mountain seemed alive, perhaps a giant had turned to stone. You find giants everywhere. In the Old Testament, the Nephilim are a strange, almost mythic people described as mighty in war and great in stature. In Greek myth, the Titans and the Cyclopean builders fought gods and shaped the world. Norse lore speaks of the Jotun, giants older than the Aesir, elemental and terrible. Each culture filled the idea of giants with what is feared and revered, overwhelming strength, the path's inscrutability, and the danger of the unknown. Why do these stories persist? Well, partly because they explain. If you find a huge tooth embedded in river silt, an ancient storyteller might say, that's the giant's tooth. If a mound of earth sits silent above the plain, someone will whisper, it marks the footfall of a huge, vanished tribe. Even the name we give a story can expand it. A mound becomes a pyramid. A stone circle becomes an altar built for giants. There's another reason, one darker and a little more human. Giants are good stories for newspapers and charlatans. A tale of prodigies and lost races sells. When early American settlers encountered vast earthen mounds and complex artifacts they couldn't fit into their worldview, they sometimes invented answers, lost races, Vikings, or white mound builders who had been driven off by later peoples. Those stories served social needs. They excused conquest. They flatteringly rewrote history, and they fed a hunger for spectacle. In North America, the idea of giants got entangled with mounds. The hundreds of earthworks left by pre-contact societies across the Mississippi Valley and the eastern woodlands. To early Euro-American audiences, these mounds were a mystery. Instead of crediting native peoples, writers and popular lecturers invented an earlier civilized people, sometimes even a white one, to claim those monuments as their work. That mountain builder myth lasted well into the 19th century. It was not just ignorance, it was a story that excused and softened the violence of colonization. Then there were the skeleton stories, headlines about giant remains popping up in local papers, sometimes with wood-cut illustrations that could make a pile of bones look like the skeleton of a giant warrior. These reports were diverse in origin, mistaken giant animal bones misread as human, wishful interpretation, exaggerated femur lengths, hoaxes, and sometimes deliberate fraud for profit or notoriety. By the 20th century, anatomists and archaeologists were calling these tall claims out. The Smithsonian and others found that when the bones were measured carefully, they matched normal, or at least human, ranges, not 8 to 20 feet tall giants. But let's not forget the gentler giant, Paul Bunyan. The mythic lumberjack, his companion babe, the blue ox, they were America's tall tale giants, not threatening so much as trickster, heroes of the great northern forests. Paul Bunyan owes his legend to lumber camp storytelling and later commercialization, with Michigan staking a claim among several states to the Paul Bunyan story and iconography. He's a reminder that giants can be affectionate as well as the terrifying. Now, let's bring our boots back to Michigan. Its pines and lakes, its sand pits and sleepy towns, where the boundary between folklore and front porch gossip is delightfully porous. Michigan's folklore catalog is rich. Paul Bunyan's statues dot towns. Ojibwe and other tribal stories model the UP and the southern shorelines, and a grab bag of local creatures write the state a distinctive mythology. Museums, such as the Kalamazoo Valley Museum, host local folklore programs that talk about little people, bones, fossils, and the way communities interpret finds that don't fit into neat categories. But there's one story that keeps rising from Michigan's pitted sand, a small town headline from November of 1906 about giant skeletons found near Coldwater in Branch County. The Courier and other small papers of the time reprinted accounts. Sandpit workers, a mound, the discovery of bones, 3 physicians pronouncing them extraordinary, perhaps human, as tall as 8 feet. The headlines were sensational, and immediately people gathered and curiosity spread. The story fed the same pattern we see elsewhere: dramatic finds reported quickly and loudly, with little time for rigorous scientific study. What likely happened? There are a few plausible explanations we can weigh in the light of later scholarship. Misidentification of large animal bones to be human bones, such as mastodons and mammoths. In the 19th century, mastodon and mammoth remains sometimes toured as giants before experts properly identified them. Human bones that looked larger because they were disarticulated, reassembled, or simply mismeasured by people unfamiliar with osteology. Estimating height from partial bones without standard methodology can widely overstate size. Local reporting pressures, small town editors wanted a story. Audiences wanted wonder. The same motives that built penny presses 2 centuries ago still sell headlines today. So far, no robust academic reanalysis has confirmed a genuine pre-Columbian population of 8-foot-tall humans in Michigan. Instead, the cold water story appears to live in the liminal zone between documented discovery and the folklore it inspired. The kind of tale that becomes bigger as it's told. A headline like that captures something about the human mind, our appetite for wonder, our hunger to feel small in a big world. Science doesn't like giants, not because scientists are mean, because bones and strata and radiocarbon dates deliver answers that don't glow in the dark. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, trained anthropologists and institutions like the Smithsonian took on the giant claims. They found natural explanations for giant bones, such as extinct megafauna, mismeasurement, and showmanship. Modern fact checkers and historians have continued that work. Reuters and PolitiFact have debunked internet resurrections of old claims that the Smithsonian hid or destroyed scores of giant skeletons. Those stories often trace back to satire or sensationalist 19th century reporting. But why don't these debunkings kill the stories? Why do images of 8 or 12-foot tall skeletons keep circulating on social platforms like they are primary evidence? Well, partly because images and narratives are sticky. A dramatic photograph or a punchy headline is easier to remember than a careful caveat, partly because myths serves as identity. They answer anxiety or feed pride or provide simple villains, and partly because the internet rewires the mechanisms of authority. Where once a naturalist in a museum could speak and be believed, now everyone with a scanner and a story can create equally persuasive artifacts, and the most sensational tends to travel fastest. So, what's the fair position for us, the storytellers, the podcasters, the curious? Be fascinated, be skeptical, celebrate the tale, and then check the bones. Let's imagine what it would have been like to have been around when this sensational story broke headlines. It's late November 1906. Cold water air tastes like iron. There's a sand pit 3 miles out of town. A place men bring horses and wagons for winter road repairs. A young man named Clark Birch is working in the pit, he strikes something harder than sand. A bone? He pries. Another. A rib? A skull? He calls for his neighbor. They clear more sand. The shape that emerges is wrong. Too long, the thigh bone like a mass spar. They measure with a boot. 8 foot? Someone laughs, then does the math, and no one laughs anymore. News travels. By the time the press arrives, the skeleton is half dusted, mouth cracked open like laughter or surprise. Townsfolk gather. 3 physicians peer, then exchange words. The paper will later print words like man and woman, 8 feet tall. The story becomes the center of the town's winter. Children dare each other to walk past the pit. A traveling lecturer collects money to see the bones. A man who runs the theater promises to rent them out to the curious. Weeks later, an expert writes from the college that the femur looks wrong when compared to a proper human femur. Perhaps it belongs to an animal. Perhaps the bones were reassembled and thus longer than in life. Perhaps the whole thing thrills the town and then settles into rumor. The bones vanish from public record, the way some stories fall into the ground and feed their roots. Though the print may belong to a mastodon or to imagination. And sometimes the difference doesn't matter to the town's children who pass the story on as truth. This is why the ethics of storytelling matters. When we tell these stories, we should also hold a lantern for those whose pasts have been misread. The mound builder myths didn't just invent giants, they erased the handiwork of Native American societies, denying the sophistication of cultures like the Ojibwe. That erasure served colonial narratives. Modern archaeology recognizes those peoples and their achievements. Modern storytellers should too. If you retell the Coldwater headline or the tales of giants, mention that those mounds and artifacts belong to living traditions. Misattributing them does real harm. So, are there giants buried in Michigan? The answer that best fits the evidence is no convincing proof of a prehistoric race of 8 or 10 foot tall humans has been published by reliable science. Yet that answer is only half the story. The other half, and perhaps the more human part, is that these legends tell us about ourselves, about fear, about wonder, about how communities make history out of mystery. If there's one thing to carry away as you turn off the lights and tuck yourself in for the night, it's this. Stories are powerful things. They can lead us to the truth, or they can bury it. They can be comforting, thrilling, and dangerous, sometimes all at once. And if you ever find a bone in a sand pit, measure it carefully, call a colleague, and then sit on the story until you know what you've got. We've been talking about giants for a while now, huh?
We have, and I kept seeing these stories popping up, and just like it was mentioned in our story, it's all over the internet. They're showing pictures of bones in an age where it's hard to tell what's real and what's not by visually looking at images. Images can be so convincing, words can be so convincing, so it's difficult to be able to tell sometimes. So I had to dig into it, and I've heard about Michigan giants for quite a while. And when it comes down to it, they just did not exist. But the legends still are there, and people are still talking about it. It's hard to snuff it out when so many people believe that it's real, and especially if it's been passed from generation to generation. Would I like to know if giants were really around in Michigan or anywhere in the world for that matter? I would love to. I've long been interested in giants since when I was a child and watching, the old Sinbad movies and Clash of the Titans, when you see these humongous monsters, and of course you'd have to be the hero to fight one of these things, and I've always wanted to be the hero and do battle with the giant. But
with your ginormous sword?
But now if you really
fighting in a giant?
Yeah, now if you really think about it, would we really ever really want a giant species ever around? That'd be quite terrifying.
I don't know. So the artwork that you're seeing, or images, photos, so are you actually seeing photos from back in the early 1900s, or do you think it's AI?
I think it's AI. And a lot of times, if you see an actual photo of these large bones, they're not assembled correctly. They're not put together correctly. They're not measurable correctly because they're spread out. So it's presumable that it could be a giant human, but without actually doing the correct investigating.
And maybe it's because, even though these men are grown that find it, inside there's still that little boy that wants to believe, oh my God, this is a giant.
Right.
And that's all they don't want to prove it any different.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
Like finding buried treasure.
Yeah. And, there was a lot of attacks against the Smithsonian Institute. There was reports of the Smithsonian bones that were ever found, that they got rid of any evidence.
Maybe it's in the dinosaur area.
Yeah.
Guess what? It belonged to T-Rex.
Yeah, they still have the bones, I bet, but they put them together correctly, and now it's a mastodon. But this is the true definition of a tall tale.
So, where was the place that we went in Ohio?
Oh, the Serpent Mound.
The Serpent Mound.
Yeah.
That was pretty spectacular.
It was very spectacular.
So did they spin a tale that mounds like the Serpent Mound were actually made for giants?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, the white men have made their own stories of how these mounds were created, and any mound. By the Euro-American mind, we made up our own stories to fit our own narrative,
Well, and when we were there, it was very, you had to really be up high, and it was hard. We couldn't get up high because the towers, they were blocked off.
Right. They were being refurbished.
Right. So it's pretty hard to imagine. We were there, so it's pretty hard for me to imagine. It's perfectly done.
Perfectly done.
So, right, the community, was it the Ojibwe? Do you remember the tribe?
The Adena.
So the Adena tribe,
mm-hmm.
I know my mind was racing with imagination because what it really looks like is that they just buried their dead in these mounds, right? On top of one another and then covered it with, I'm still confused about that.
Lack of artifacts and burials compared to other mounds from these cultures points to a unique purpose, possibly ceremonial. Because I didn't find a lot of bones. I didn't find a lot of artifacts within the Serpent Mound of Ohio. So they can speculate that it was for ceremonial purposes.
And I think, didn't we even see something on, National Geographic where they were thinking aliens built it?
Oh, sure.
So again, imagination running wild. Now I do believe that there are aliens.
Again, and then it diverts away from, and it diminishes, the
culture,
the Native American culture, which it's got to stop.
Agreed.
It's got to stop. Native American culture should be revered and loved and respected
And remembered.
And it's one thing to tell stories, but to cover up truths with falsehoods like that it's not right.
Right. Yeah. And fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I loved it there. It was really unique. It was fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did it.
Me too.
What would you do if you found a big bone in our backyard?
Well, I guess if I found it before Archie did.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to take it somewhere to get it analyzed to find out what it was, It'd be weird enough just finding a big bone in your backyard. Could it be a horse? Could it be
a dog?
A dog? Could it be a giant human? You'd have to find that out. So the whole Cyclops myth was born out of elephant skull, because they have that large nasal cavity that looks like it would have been an optical hole in a skull, creating, this imaginary cycloptic creature, and thus the Cyclops myth began that way.
Oh, that's an old one.
Yeah, because, there wasn't a whole lot of elephants around. There were elephants around in Greece, but not native to Greece. So when a skull was found, obviously, the stories were spun.
Well, I know where they came from.
The Persians.
The Persians. Yeah. See? I know a little bit of history.
You know a little bit about
just
a little
smidgy.
bit, don't you?
Just a smidge.
Right.
Just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great story, hon. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, you want to sign us out?
I sure do. You better lock your doors. You better lock your windows. And you might want to check under your bed.
And if I find a big femur bone, I'm going to spin a tale about a giant.
That's right.
Yep. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Hey. We and we will see you again on Malice Monday.
See you on Monday.